Welcome everyone, this is another episode of Hackitect Playground, and today we will talk about a very interesting topic, and that's SBOM. So we will talk about SBOMs and how they can be used and how we can actually utilize them. So this episode will be very special. So we will talk about SBOM in a nutshell. So what actually SBOM is and how it can help you, and then I will show you how to implement an SBOM with AWS Inspector, because that's a very new feature introduced this year, and I was like, okay, that's something that I can show you. Also, I was building like SBOM engine with ETL and everything around it in my company where I'm working right now. And the thing is, I cannot show you these really cool things that we are building, but I can show you at least some other stuff that I consider beneficial for my community. So let's go and let's deep dive in. So SBOMs are basically software bill of materials, so metadata about your, how to say it, about your software. So it's inventory of libraries, it's inventory of components, licenses, and metadata about your software. It helps you to know what you produce, what you consume, and knowing your dependencies, how your software is being used. And this is something which is very cool to know, because you will know in every step what you produced and what you consume as a third-party dependencies, the version of the libraries, the licenses. And it also helps to understand security implications, because you know which vulnerabilities can be hidden inside. This is super cool, and I really think that you will enjoy it. And it can be in JSON or XML formats. With that, it's attached also a very cool feature where you can actually sign these things and you can produce them. Another really interesting things to know is this will be very mandatory due to compliance and regulatory reasons in many countries. So when you're producing software, you actually need to produce an attestation about your CI/CD, or you need to produce an SBOM. So let's move forward. The SBOM formats here actually, there are two main formats, and it's an SPDX and CycloneDX. The SPDX is a software package data exchange, and the CycloneDX is an OWASP project. The SPDX is Linux Foundation project. It's mainly for licensing, mainly for understanding the components. It's recognized as an SBOM standard. I think it's from 2011 or something, and it contains the file information about your files in your packages, and they're included like in this SPDX. And CycloneDX also contains extra data. It's a lightweight format, and it supports provenance tracking. So, and this which is also very important, the SVID or SWID, the common platform enumeration, and package URL, it can be contained in SPDX, but the format is very different. So CycloneDX contains CPE vulnerabilities in the app, and also it can contain software identification tag, and it can also contain the package, or it usually contains it, the package URL called plural. It's like very interesting name, and it lists the software packages metadata. So the export, another thing what is very important is exporting SBOMs in AWS. So I will talk about that a lot. So how you can export SBOM in AWS. Amazon Inspector version 2 supports SBOM exports for CycloneDX and also for SPDX. Version 1.4 for CycloneDX, version 2.3 for SPDX. Currently, it doesn't support the Windows EC2 instances, so you will need to wait for that one. And also, you can export only with AWS Inspector version 2 managed resources. It exports to JSON, the JSON files, to selected bucket. I mean S3 bucket. And how the architecture actually looks like. So this is a very high level view. So you encrypt your bucket with AWS key management system with a customer managed key, and AWS Inspector scans Elastic Container Registry. It scans Lambda, and it scans EC2 instances. So if you look at that specifically, it takes the data from the scans and then exports the SBOM to S3 bucket of your selection in the format of your selection, which can be CycloneDX or SPDX. So if we move forward, what are the filters for SBOM? So what you can actually filter to select what will be part of your SBOM. So basically, it can be account ID for any resources associated with your account ID provided. That's basically the number of your account. Then EC2 instant tags, instance tag. That's very important because that's something that you can really utilize, like selecting your critical instances or production instances or demo instances. So you can select the subset of EC2 instances. So also the function name for Lambda function, image tags, for example, the latest tags or production tags, depends on your tagging policy, and also the Lambda function tag. So if your Lambda is tagged, you can actually use that one. And basically, you can use also the resource type, which can be EC2, ECR, or Lambda. So you will say you can actually select specific resource types that you can have in your, or what you want to have in your report. The resource ID is an identifier of the specific resource, and the repository name is a repository name of your ECR repository, obviously. So you can go to the different granularity of the things that you want to have in your SBOMs. For example, you don't care about your development environment, or you don't care about specific regions, or you don't care about the specific tags. You can exclude them by these filters. The setting up the environment. This is a very important thing. If I will say, hey, let's go, there are some prerequisites. So it will be very hard for you to find out that in the documentation. Maybe you will get a little bit lost. When I was setting that in my environment, I was like also struggling with some small minor details. So you need to prepare the SBOM bucket with the KMS key. That's very important. So you need to encrypt the bucket, you need to create the key. KMS key must have permissions to decrypt and generate data key. This is very important. And this basically KMS key must be usable by AWS Inspector. So the permissions need to allow Inspector to do these operations. And bucket policy must allow also Inspector to put new objects in the S3 bucket. You need to have enabled Amazon Inspector version 2, and you also need to manage, that's very important, you need to manage vulnerabilities for Lambda, EC2, or ECR. So if you do not manage your vulnerabilities with Inspector, you will be not able to get the data. This is very important. And then you are ready to export the SBOMs for your environment. Before we will start with the SBOM export, we need to understand the prerequisites for this. So if I will go to permissions, here in the permissions, that is very easy. And when you create an S3 bucket, it needs to have specific permissions, and I will show you which ones. I didn't want to go through all of this process because it's very complicated, so I really want to show you what needs to be set up. If you do not understand this, there's also CloudFormation that will actually help you a lot, and there is also a guide which you can use on AWS documentation. If I will go here, in the bucket policy, you need to allow the inspector to put object ACL, and abort multipart upload. And you need to also use this for the resource of your S3 bucket. Also, your account ID or source account needs to be there, and also the ARN for the inspector that you will be using needs to be in this bucket policy. So the inspector needs to be able to put object ACL, and abort multipart upload. These three things are super necessary to have because inspector will be not able to export and put the SBOM object in your S3 bucket. Second part of preparations is a key which will encrypt the S3 bucket. You need to create customer managed key which is symmetric with a symmetric default encrypt and decrypt key usage for your S3 bucket. Now you can go here in customer managed keys, you can create new key, you can see symmetric and encrypt and decrypt, you can create your own alias. That's also very easy to use. So it's very easy to create this key. When you create this key, it's also very important. If I will go to this alias, I'm using alias SBOM Hackitect. So I will go to this key ID. You see that this key is for a single region. It was created October 20th. And here, the key policy, this is super important. I have there some of my users just for fun, just to play with the permissions. What is very important, this key needs to have the KMS actions, like the common ones, but you need to add there this specific SID, this one. And that means allow Amazon Inspector to use this key to actually decrypt the data, generate the data key, and also edit the encrypt because I really want to put there the keys. So I did small changes to here, but these two should be fine. In some cases, I really need to have problems with this one. So you need to add the new permissions for the key for Amazon Inspector version 2. Also, another important thing, version 2, to basically decrypt and generate the data key to work with the encryption, because you really need to encrypt the bucket, and you need to allow Inspector to work with this key too. So this is also very important. The Inspector needs to be able to access to your S3 bucket, and the Inspector needs to be able to use this key, and without that it will not work, because that's a requirement to have encrypted, because SBOMs are very important. They can contain sensitive data. They contain how your software is actually being built. So because of that, you really need to encrypt that data. So here we are in Inspector, and now the fun begins. You see that I have one from 2 accounts monitored. That's just for example. I have 1 from 8 instances monitored, and I have 100% repositories. Inspector is a vulnerability scanning and management solution for AWS. It has its flaws, but it's also very good if you are looking for the native solution for AWS. You will see the risk-based remediations, you will see the accounts monitored, you will see ECR repositories monitored, you will see EC2 instances that are monitored, you will see AMIs that are being scanned, Lambda functions or code detectors for the Lambda code scanning. So it is very interesting solution from code to your infrastructure as code. So when I will go to some package name, I just want to show you because it's not bad. In the vulnerability description, it basically says about the package type, the severity of the issue. What I really like, because they didn't steep on the modern thing, there's also exploit prediction scoring system. In addition to CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System, they use the exploit prediction scoring system, which I think is very critical for nowadays applications. So EPSS score, check it out, because that's basically it's telling you how interesting the vulnerability will be in next 30 days for the hacking community. This is like additional score to add in your scoring system. But why we are talking about this? All of these packages being scanned by Inspector, and that's also important. Before you will export the SBOM, and it's here, before you will export any SBOMs, you actually need to manage the resources that you want to generate SBOM for by AWS Inspector. If it is not managed by Inspector, you will be not able to export the SBOM. So what is important? You can filter by account ID, EC2 instant tag, function name, this is for Lambdas, for image tags, is for ECR repositories, Lambda function tag, repository name, which is also for ECR, resource ID, and resource type. So you have all of these filters that you can use for generating SBOMs. If I will go to resource type, I will say I'm interested on EC2 and ECR repositories, because I already have some ECR repositories. And maybe before we will start, I will even show you. I will go to ECR and I will open the ECR registry, and I already should have something here. And yes, I have the repository name Hackitect, and actually this is a juice shop just modified. And when you will check that there are many vulnerabilities, so it's already there, it's managed by Inspector, and it is telling me what problems I do have in my image. So this is already prepared. So when I will go back to the generation, for the resource type, you need to click on apply. When you apply the filter, it will appear like below the filter, so you know that you did everything well. There are 2 formats, CycloneDX and SPDX, which is a Linux-based Linux Foundation project. CycloneDX is a OWASP project. CycloneDX contains more data, so I really recommend to use CycloneDX, because if you are looking especially for security and more metadata around your packages and your software, CycloneDX is your choice. So the export location is the bucket that we created. So when I will go to my bucket, I have this SBOM bucket that I showed you. with all the bucket permissions and the encryption with the KMS key. Now you need to select the KMS key. Without this, it will not work. You see, the key must be enabled, and you can set up your key alias if you want. This is very important. Without this, it will not work. So then you will click on export, and when you export this, it will show you this like action window, like your export for identifier of the export. This is an identifier of the Cyclone DX export. It's being generated. So I will just pause the video and wait when the SBOM will be generated. When the SBOM is generated, you should see this green message, and you see also here is an identifier of the export. So I will just copy paste this one just for future usage and view report. When I click on view report, it will redirect me to the S3 bucket. So in this bucket, I will show you here just for fun. You see that there is the same identifier like here. So this is an identifier of the Cyclone DX export. When I go here, there is another like prefix which is saying account ID. So this is my account, and then EC2 instance. So this is export generated for the instance itself. So when I will go here for the instance, there's a Cyclone DX 1.4, which is the version of the format, and then I can actually download this SBOM to show you what's inside. When you look closer on the content of the Cyclone DX format, you will see the BOM format. It's a bill of materials, the version, and the version of the bill of materials itself. The timestamp, the components, you see this in Amazon Linux. It will tell me which AMI is there, the value of the AMI, which is very good for something that we call IBOM, which is infrastructure bill of materials, which is another version of the BOM, which is very important. And then you have the components. It will tell you the component type. You see this is application, the name of it, the package URL, the version of that, and the reference ID for it. So basically, it should be basically the integrity check. Not always is that because it depends on the provider. And when you look at that, you see here that there are different types of applications, different types of components that will tell you that your code is being composed. It's a very long list. And when you are using the Cyclone DX, it can even tell you which vulnerabilities are attached to the specific resources, which is very good because the SBOM can be really good source of not only of your component and composition of your software. That means you know what you consume and you know what you build and you know what you produce, but also for your security stuff. So you see here that there are lots of CVEs and which sources or which parts of your software are actually affected by specific vulnerability. This is absolutely great metadata that you can generate in your CI/CD. You can generate it in AWS. So that's what I want to show you because that's a pretty new feature and I really like that. Only pitfall here is that there are some prerequisites and you need to manage your resources with AWS Inspector version 2. What is very important that you can use AWS CLI or API. So you can use AWS CLI version 2, so don't forget to update if you are using the old one. And you can use two important API calls or two important CLI commands, which is a create SBOM export and second is get SBOM export. So obviously create SBOM export is for creating the export and it will send the data to S3 bucket. To get the SBOM export, basically it will just take a metadata about that. It will just not give you full data. And I see some attack vectors here, so be careful with that. And I think that this commitment of AWS to provide you an API and CLI for these things is something that you can actually use in your day-by-day work. Obviously, you can use Boto3 to get these things or automate these things. You can have Lambda doing that for you. And I found that very amazing. And I think about 3 or 4 different architectures that you can actually utilize on your day-by-day job to create something like infrastructure bill of materials. Because this is something that I didn't mention at the beginning of the session. Basically, you can have AI bill of materials or ML bill of materials, software bill of materials, infrastructure bill of materials, or Kubernetes bill of materials. So many different bill of materials, the ledgers of your software are available for you. So this is really, really, really good. And I'm very happy that AWS is going this way. You can actually even use AWS CLI to generate the report. So I will show you AWS version because I'm using the new version. So you need to have AWS CLI version 2 because of the support for Inspector version 2. So I will go to the command that I will explain you here. So AWS Inspector create SBOM export is the API that you need to call. Then the report format will actually dictate the format itself. So I'm using here Cyclone DX 1.4. Then the S3 destination is where you will store your SBOMs. And here is the bucket name and the key that I'm using. You need to use the ARN, the Amazon resource number, to reference the specific key for encryption. Don't ask me why, but that's the way. Then here I will hit enter, and then it will start to generate the report. It will take few minutes before the report is generated. So here is the report ID, and we will be able to query that one. If the report is in progress, you will actually see it. So AWS, I think it was Inspector 2, and then get SBOM report, the report ID. Then when I hit enter, when it is in progress, it will tell you, okay, this is succeeded. And when it is generating the report, it will tell you this is in progress. So when you get SBOM report, it will tell you, okay, here, Inspector, get SBOM report, then the report ID, then the comparison of the value for the account ID that I'm actually using, the filter, because you can change the filter also, the format, the report ID, and the destination of that. And here it will tell you if it succeeded, or if it is in progress, or if it failed. So you will see the report. Then basically the important thing is that you know where is the report ID, and you actually also know where it is stored. So you don't actually get the whole report, but it will just give you the data about it. Thank you for watching today's episode. I really hope that you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the like, and don't forget to comment. So do it, yeah? Right now.